Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This week we have record heat waves where the electric company is saying prepare the generators, but remember that Biden wants to remove those generators. We have WorldCoin announcing that they have over 2 million customers, but just go ahead and have your eye scanned to be able to get access to that, and much, much more. Let's go ahead and get started. Biggest news of the week is the interest rate hike from the Fed. We're now at a 22-year high, which is 5.5%. That is 2001. They did leave the possibility for future increases as well. The U.S. annual inflation did slow considerably in June. We also had numbers out from, I believe it was Malaysia and I believe Singapore. Both of those came in under expectations as well. And this is likely going to push the Fed closer to ending the fastest interest rate hike since the 1980s due to the good inflation reports. And about 77.6% of all of the 152 companies on the S&P 500 reported earnings that have beaten analysis so far to date. So overall, it's not good that they raised interest rates because remember that the United States and most other countries around the world now, I would say industrialized countries, Europe, Australia, probably China, I can throw in there Japan, they have a situation where we're over levered, right? Here in Colombia, for example, most houses, only 10% of the houses in the country are mortgaged. Everybody pays cash for everything. It's very different in other kind of, second tier, third tier countries. I don't think it's politically correct to say third world country anymore, right? So whenever we have a situation where we raise the interest rates, whether it's in the US, especially in the US, or anywhere overseas, especially in industrialized countries, that affects quite a bit the consumer spending because we've grown addicted to debt, right? And because we've been addicted to debt and things have been so cheap for so long, we're talking about since 2008, 2009, there's a situation where everybody's overlevered. We're talking about the government, the federal government, we're talking about states, we're talking about cities, we're talking about people, everybody. So when the interest rate rises, it's a lot harder for us to afford things, whether that's for housing or cars or, your credit cards. So it's super important. It's super sensitive, let's say, the market whenever they raise interest rates because everything becomes much more expensive. And we're kind of used to this lifestyle with really low interest rates. And it's every time that they raise the rates, it kind of bites us in the butt because everything becomes 2 times, 3 times more expensive. The markets overall this week, because of the news, went up. The US was all positive. The only one that was negative in North America was Canada. And the European markets, mostly positive as well. Istanbul was the biggest winner there. In Latin America, we have, looking at the numbers here, the exchange in Mexico being the most positive. And then also Africa and the Middle East, mostly positive there as well. South Africa being the biggest winner there. And then the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was the biggest winner in Asia. And most of those markets were positive as well, even though it was a bit mixed. Bitcoin and crypto. There's a big buzz about WorldCoin so far this week that they've attracted over 2 million users. WorldCoin was founded by the ChatGPT co-founder Sam Altman. So one of the interesting things that he said, and let me bring Conspiracy Marcello. One of the interesting things that he said, I love that. I love that. I got to update it, but I love that. But anyway, he said that we will have a digital currency connected to a digital profile or a digital ID, whether you like it or not. So now the interesting thing with this is that people are lining up in lines to have their irises scanned. And I don't know if you guys have seen, I think it was in an Aldi in the UK, you can't pay for anything with your card. It has to be with your palm. So if you don't pay with your palm, you just can't buy anything from Aldi in UK in a certain location. So that's how they spring it up on us. So get ready for that delicious world government, communist government we're going to get ready to live in. The first crypto investment fund was launched in Spain, because the socialists take forever to register things. And Bitcoin for the week is down 0.24% to just over $29,200. It's kind of been range bound for a while. Normally that's the behavior with Bitcoin. It'll just be range bound, then all of a sudden it'll explode in one direction or the other. In commodities, South Africa has met its climate goals thanks to blackouts that slashed emissions. A lot of the news articles I thought was really interesting because they talked about how they met their climate goals, not about how people are living in darkness. And this is kind of what's going on in the rest of the country because we've had these record heat waves, and the largest interconnected grid in the United States, which is in the Northeast, all the way up to Pennsylvania and New Jersey, right? New York is on a different grid. Maine, they're on different grids. But they talked about how they were declaring a emergency for the second day in a row and to prepare the generators. I thought this was really interesting because if you remember last week, they talked about how the Biden administration wants to remove and not allow you to buy portable gas generators. So you see how we're connecting two dots together, right? Well, I talked to you guys about in 2020, December 2020, when I did that video during the pandemic, how the blackouts were coming, and now they want you to live in darkness. That's why they want to, like, why would they all of a sudden want to just prohibit you from buying a gas generator when you're going to need it? They know what's coming. The orange juice squeezes to a record high as well as the intensifying fear of a global shortage. Brazil now, there's a company called Citrosuco, which is the world's top, or one of the world's top orange producers. They talked about they're going to have to declare what's called a force majeure for their clients. Force majeure is when a company just can't commit to their clients due to extreme circumstances. In this case, crop disease and extensive rainfall damages in their citrus groves. U.S. poultry producers are facing a prolonged economic pain from the avian flu that's affecting them for months. Even though they don't have an infection, there was a lot of countries that actually prohibited the importation of chicken from the U.S. due to the situation with the flu, even though now there is no flu. But one of the things that you'll find interesting is that in the U.S., they actually bleach the chicken. So you can't export, for example, U.S. chicken to Europe because they don't allow that in Europe because it's unhealthy. See how that works? U.S. gas prices surged to its highest level since November. It's at $3.71 a gallon. That's going to put some increasing pressure on inflation because everything in the United States is sent via truck. So if gas prices continue to rise, it's going to continue to push prices higher as well. And the U.S. crude so far this week went up. The U.S. crude went up over 4% to $80.58, with the Brent over 4.6% at almost $85. Gold went down. We had a little bit of a push in the dollar, but then it came back down after the inflation report. So gold went down by 0.07% to $1,960, while silver went down 0.93% to $24.41. Financial and banking news. Commercial real estate isn't the only company or bank, let's call it, problem that you may not be thinking of. Obviously, we have the situation where after the pandemic, companies have switched their business models. They don't really need commercial real estate anymore. They don't need these big towers where all their workers go because they're either doing a hybrid model where you work from home some days, you go into the office for others. But most companies now are cutting back, especially since it's cheaper, a lot cheaper for them to have people work from home rather than come to the office. And I think it's a little bit interesting where I would think that the effectiveness of a worker would go down, right? Because they're working from home and they're lollygagging and stuff, but their productivity would go down, but the cost difference is just skyrocket because you don't have to pay for an office anymore, right? So I think in a way it might balance it out. But one of the things that you may not think about is that a lot of cities get about 2/3 of their income, their revenue, from commercial real estate. So what's going to happen outside of the financial system with banks? What's going to happen with the city revenues when the value of all these offices go down by 50 and 60%? Like, this is an absolute catastrophe waiting to happen. The fifth bank in the United States went bankrupt this year, the fifth of the year. It's called Tri-State Bank of Texas. Tri-State Bank in Kansas was closed by regulators. And the LATAM country support for alternative currencies have been increasing lately. The latest news is Bolivia now is looking to curb its dependence on the U.S. dollar for foreign trade and switch to the yuan. They've had severe dollar shortages in the last few months. And one of the things is that their reserves have dropped from $15 billion in 2014 to just $4 billion now. So Bolivia could possibly have another financial crisis very soon. In political news, the son of LeBron James, 18-year-old son, suffered a heart attack during practice. There was also an 18-year-old Linda Caicedo, which is on the National Colombia soccer team. She collapsed on the field as well. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't ever remember hearing about so many 18-year-olds collapsing on the field. Now, it has to be climate change, because there couldn't be another thing that happened 2 or 3 years ago that changed, because I find it very unusual. If you think about, just in the case of LeBron James, the guy is just a physical phenomenon. He's 39 years old, still playing in professional basketball, and being the second oldest guy in the entire league. The oldest guy doesn't even play anymore. He's better than most of the people in the league. How is it possible that with that genetics, he has a heart attack at 18 when he was one of the most hyped prospects for the NBA? That's why I put in political news, because, talked about the record heat waves. In economic news, the French and Spanish economies displayed unexpected resilience in Q2, while the German economy, which is the largest in Europe, starting to stagnate quite a bit. So everybody's talking about the recession that's not only coming around the world, but in Europe as well. The US GDP grew at 2.4%, which is the fourth straight quarter of positive growth. It was much higher than expected, 2.4 instead of the expected 1.8. And this is the resilience of the consumer spending, because, in the US, we're all about spending that money. Corporate news, Spotify fell over 14% after their numbers weren't as good as reported. They reported revenue of $3.18 billion compared to $3.5 expected. The full year guidance as well, they dropped. Chipotle, which is one of the best restaurants in the United States, dropped almost 10% on Thursday after they didn't deliver very well on their guidance as well. It was under expectations, but they're still up almost 40% so far in 2023. Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, went up 4% to a near record high since 2022. They reported very strong earnings. $32 billion in revenue. Friday, it hit a brand new high at $326.20. Their stock is up almost 171% so far this year. And Elon Musk rebranded Twitter to the X app, and their users reached a new high at 540 million people. It's looking to boost revenue after it dropped in the recent month, probably because of this whole political situation covering that. And Tesla is in serious talks with an India factory to be able to build a $24,000 compact electric vehicle. There's been a lot of production news about the new Cybertruck as well. And the US chip maker Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD, said on Friday that they're going to invest around $400 million in the over the next 5 years. You can see how we have a lot of news about India. India now is the fifth largest economy in the world. It took over the UK. But the main thing is that now, since there's so much political uncertainty in China, a lot of people are taking their business out of China and moving to India. In trade news, the Philippine president said that they're going to try to boost rice stocks and may seek a supply deal with India. This is due to the worry about the potential shortages in their own country. El Nino dry weather is going to affect the local harvest. And now the Philippines is one of the, if you didn't know, one of the largest importers of rice in the world. So they're going to try to make an agreement with India because they now get a lot of their rice from Vietnam, and Vietnam is probably going to have another buyers now due to the situation worldwide. Remember that India, if I'm not mistaken, was 40% of the exportation of rice in the world. So if 40% of the rice of the supply is out because India is going to ban it now, that means that the price is going to go up quite a bit. Technology, France's privacy watchdog CNIL said Friday that they're aware of WorldCoin's project and that their legally biometric data collection seems questionable. So at least we have some government trying to fight for our rights. And over 175 million people now are in excessive heat warnings and advisories until at least Saturday afternoon. Philadelphia, the heat index is at 108 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 42 Celsius. New York City got 103 degrees Fahrenheit or 39 degrees Celsius. And last month was the hottest June on record in the U.S. dating back to 1850. Now remember, There's a lot of news right now where, oh, it's not been the hottest on record, hottest on record. Just remember that they've only been taking records since 1850. So we don't know whether the Earth has actually been hotter. Actually, there was a lot of speculation that there was actually a year that was hotter, which I believe was 1936. But don't believe it when they say it's the hottest time ever, because they didn't take records back in the year 1000 or 2000 or 3000. So, right? The world's going to end in 5 years is what they always say. Interesting facts. Cactus in Arizona have had arms falling off, and some are even tipping over due to the heat that they've had there. Their heat has gotten to 110 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 days. That's 43 degrees Celsius. The cacti need to cool down at night through mist or rain or through the cooler air, and they haven't been able to do that. So even plants now are starting to get affected by the heat wave. And one of the things that was really interesting is they found a cargo ship over 2,000 years old off the coast of Rome in Italy. They're estimating it to date back to the 1st or 2nd century BC, and it was carrying hundreds of I hope I'm saying this right, amphorae, which is basically Roman jars. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.